In the quiet dawn of an American military base tucked far from the eyes of the world, the rhythmic cadence of boots on concrete echoed through the cold morning air. Second Lieutenant Emily Garter, only 24 years old, stood in her pressed uniform, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders, though her posture revealed nothing but pride and determination. She was new, untested, but she had carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had already survived storms before the Army ever put a patch on her shoulder. Emily had grown up in a small town, the kind where everyone knew everyone, and dreams often stayed tethered to the ground. But she had broken free, driven by her father's stories of discipline and her mother's reminders of resilience. Now she was here, thousands of miles from home, standing in formation among hardened men and women, all of them veterans of the base's culture, all of them curious about how this young officer would fit in. At first, Emily drew stares. Some admired her sharp mind, her refusal to be intimidated. Others resented her, the way she stood tall as if she carried a light that refused to dim. But one man in particular noticed her more than anyone else, Colonel Richard Keene, a grizzled officer with 25 years of service behind him. To most, he was a storm, loud, harsh, feared, and unrelenting. To Emily, he was supposed to be a mentor, someone she could learn from. But what she would come to realize was that some storms don't guide, they destroy. The first weeks were tough but manageable. Emily proved herself during drills, often outpacing even seasoned officers during physical training. She had a mind for tactics, the kind that caught even senior leaders off guard. In meetings, she didn't just nod along. She asked questions, hard ones, the type that made people uncomfortable but also revealed her seriousness. And it was this that caught Keene's attention. The colonel had never liked being challenged, especially not by someone young, and especially not by a woman. His generation had been raised differently, his ideas fossilized in decades of unchecked authority. So when Emily questioned one of his training plans, pointing out a flaw that could risk soldiers' safety, he didn't just feel corrected, he felt humiliated. And humiliation for a man like Keene was something unforgivable. He started small, sarcasm in meetings, mocking her in front of others, calling her the Princess Lieutenant. He made her run extra laps, double-checked her reports, and spread rumors that she was arrogant. But Emily didn't flinch. Every slight became fuel, every insult an iron nail that hardened her resolve. She had promised herself long ago, no man, no power, no cruelty would ever break her spirit. Then came the day that would change everything. It was during a training exercise, when the officers gathered in the mess hall afterward, sweaty and tired, laughter and chatter filling the air. Emily had walked in, her uniform still damp, her face glowing with the satisfaction of another completed drill. The colonel spotted her across the room, his expression dark. He had planned something cruel, something he thought would teach her a lesson in humiliation so deep she would never recover. He called her over, his booming voice silencing the hall. She stepped forward, every eye watching, the tension thick. Without warning, he grabbed her by the arm, pulled her close, and in one swift, shocking motion, shoved her head into a toilet nearby. The room erupted in gasps, some in nervous laughter, others in stunned silence. The sound of water splashing, the metallic echo of porcelain, the sharp gasp Emily made as she was yanked back up. All of it etched itself into the memory of every soldier who stood there. Time froze. Her hair clung to her face, her uniform soaked at the collar, humiliation dripping down her like acid. The colonel smirked, his voice dripping with venom. That's what happens when you forget your place. For a moment, Emily stood motionless. She could have broken. She could have cried, screamed, stormed out, or begged for justice, but she did none of those things. Instead, she straightened her back, wiped the water from her face with steady hands, and looked the colonel dead in the eyes with a calm so fierce it unsettled even him. And then, with every soldier watching, she smiled. Not a sarcastic smile, not a weak one, but the kind of smile that says, "You cannot touch who I am inside." She turned to the room, her voice clear, sharp, unwavering. "You think this humiliates me? It doesn't. What humiliates this base, what dishonors this uniform, is not water in my hair. It's a leader who uses power to crush instead of guide. You can push my head into a toilet, Colonel, but you'll never push my spirit down." The hall was silent. Soldiers exchanged glances. some biting back grins, others staring wide-eyed. For the first time, someone had stood up to Keane, not with fists, not with rage, but with a courage so raw it disarmed him completely. Word spread like wildfire. By nightfall, everyone on base knew what had happened. At first, whispers of disbelief traveled. Had she really said that? Had she really stood her ground? Then admiration followed. Soldiers began to approach Emily quietly at first, then more openly. They told her they respected her, that she had shown what real leadership looked like. Even the senior officers heard about it. Some were appalled by Keane's behavior, but most had been too afraid to ever call him out. Emily had done what none of them dared, expose the truth without flinching. The days that followed were tense. Keane tried to assert control again, but the base had shifted. His authority no longer commanded the same fear. His insults fell flat. His orders were followed, but not respected. And Emily, she became a symbol. Soldiers began to carry themselves differently around her, inspired by her composure. In quiet corners, they repeated her words almost like a mantra. "You can't push my spirit down." Then came the investigation. What had happened couldn't stay buried. Reports were filed, testimonies gathered. Emily, when questioned, didn't exaggerate, didn't play the victim. She simply told the truth, her calmness again disarming those who expected anger or tears. The colonel, meanwhile, grew defensive, his temper flaring during every interview. Slowly, the truth caught up with him, and the tide turned. Within months, Keane was forced into early retirement, his career ending not with honor, but with shame. And Emily, she stayed. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. She knew her journey was far from over. She continued her service, carrying forward the lesson that leadership wasn't about power, but about strength of character, about standing tall even when the world tried to drag you into the dirt. Years later, soldiers who had been there that day still told the story of Second Lieutenant Emily Garter. Not the story of humiliation, but the story of resilience. They remembered the colonel's cruelty, yes, but more than that. They remembered the moment a young officer stunned an entire base with nothing more than her courage and her refusal to be broken. And if you had asked Emily about it, she would have simply said, "What matters isn't what they do to you. What matters is what you choose to do next." Her story became a quiet legend, a whispered reminder in the barracks, in the field, in the heat of training and in the heart of war, that sometimes the greatest victories aren't won with weapons or strategy, but with the unshakable strength to rise when someone tries to make you fall.